In your opinion, which serial killer is the scariest and why? Toy box killer by far. He would tie up his victims in a metal chair, force them to watch a video telling them what he is gonna do to them and introducing the dogs that were gonna violate them. His van had a number of torture devices for both sexual exploitation and pain-intensive purposes. He is suspected to have had more than 60 victims, mostly younger women and some teens. Good God, how does someone get to the point where they are okay doing that shit to a person? How do you even get the idea for any of it in the first place? How do rapists, torturers, and killers live with themselves? Do they just dehumanize their victims first? I read that transcript one day during my lunch break at work. It completely threw off the second half of my day. Even now, several years later, every once in a while it'll creep back into my head. It is sickening. Came here to say this: I wish I'd never found out about him and the stuff he did. Dean Krull and the Toolbox Killers were pretty bad too, but the Toy Box Killer is the worst typo. I believed he was part of the inspiration for the Saw movies, at least as the tape recorder goes. Holy crap. I looked onto it and one of his victims was thought to be dead, so he left her by the side of the road. After she recovered, her husband didn't believe her and thought she had been cheating on him, so he divorced her. How unbelievably awful. And that she only found it was real when the FBI identified a tattoo on her ankle in one of his videos. The sicko even dropped her off at her home, claiming to have found her wandering on the beach. He worked for the Parks Department, and the family thanked him. You didn't even add in that he would make them forget the entire experience by using barbiturates to mind control them. They'd be found weeks after they went missing, wandering the roads in a haze. Absolutely insane. I am a true crime junkie. I've listened to and read a lot of fucked up shit because the human psychology of it fascinates me to no end. Taboo things always interest me, but that is the one case they tapped out very early. Once they described the box, I knew for my own mental health that I couldn't watch any further. Never heard the message, never learned more on what he did. I just know it was beyond what my own mind could take. So sorry you witnessed the details. Hope you're okay. I am a true crime junkie. I've listened to and read a lot of fucked up shit because the human psychology of it fascinates me to no end. Taboo things always interest me, but that is the one case they tapped out very early. Once they described the box, I knew for my own mental health that I couldn't watch any further. Never heard the message, never learned more on what he did. I just know it was beyond what my own mind could take. So sorry you witnessed the details. Hope you're okay. Yeah, that would be even more terrifying. So glad I don't live in any big city area, and the worst we have around here is a potential cat killer that the cops tried blaming on coyotes. Yeah, because coyotes slice a throat and make cuts to remove the heart and not eat or injure any other part of the cat. BTK. Dennis Rader. This is mostly biased because I read John Douglas' book about him, with all the excruciating details of his crimes. Sample: during a home invasion, he tied up the hands and feet of the mother, father, and brother, who was around 9 seconds old, one by one. He then duct-taped a plastic bag over their heads. The young daughter was forced to sit on his lap and watch as they suffocated. Finally, he took the daughter to the basement, put a noose around her neck and looped it around a pipe so the other end was free. He could then sit in a chair and periodically choke her until near death, loosening the rope intermittently to keep her alive. And, of course, he ejaculated on her after killing her. I would say he should get a taste of his own medicine, but he actually got off on doing this stuff to himself too. He does also win for most hilarious way of getting caught though. For anyone who doesn't know, he asked the police if they could catch him using metadata from a floppy disk. The police said number. He sent them the floppy disk. Turns out the police were lying. Fucking idiot. If you actually watch him confessing to the courts and read up on how the vast majority of his murders went down, it becomes apparently he was a total fucking moron and unorganized and just a shitty killer overall. He had lots of victims, but it was a total disaster almost every time, just a complete loser. Dude's a freak. I grew up in Wichita, where most of his killings took place. When he resurfaced, before they caught him, was a pretty scary time. I was very young during his original reign of terror, but when he came back I was old enough to know what happened. His flat, monotone voice as he described his crimes in open court was truly chilling. They don't get caught if they have an institution behind them or a dangerous job. Think healthcare workers, police, prison wards, assisted living staff, lumberjacks, oil drill staff, construction workers, any place where several deaths in a row would not be too suspicious. Just kind of expected tragedies that happen. Dahmer might have been a sex offender, but no one was on to him or suspected what was going on until he was exposed by his last would-be victim. As for Ted Bundy, that's what I'm getting at. Eventually doing crimes repeatedly will get you exposed, even if what you were initially caught for was for something other than murder, like having a burglary kit. In Bundy's case, he got way too bold. That poor girl was the real reason he got caught, fought tooth and nail against him, and he wasn't used to that. Prior to that, he got stopped multiple times and even arrested, but he always schmoozed his way out. Can't talk your way out of it when the victim points you out by a cop car driving by. Having his kit in the vehicle didn't help either. Exactly. The Golden State Killer only got away with it for so long because it is believed he stopped killing after 1986 until genealogy DNA matches finally led to his identity. Same with BTK. It's thought he stopped killing for decades before he contacted the media again. If they'd stopped killing, they have a much higher chance of not getting caught. I'd venture to say Zodiac did the same. The Zodiac was smart to stop if that's ultimately what happened. When Dahmer was caught, he was in a tailspin and killed 4 victims within the same week. He got careless and started becoming delusional. Ted Bundy could have stopped killing after he got to Florida and they wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. But he wigged out and decided to attack a sorority and kidnap a 12-year-old in broad daylight instead of lying low. These guys can't help themselves. You're probably right, even prostitutes have cell phone cameras, and the places they work often have them as well. Someone would see something eventually. Maybe people who travel as part of their job, a merchant marine worker killing in ports around the world. Pedro Lopez of Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Dude served only 22 years for the murder of 110 300-plus girls. After luring girls and killing them, he'd keep the bodies to have sex with and talk to until they decomposed. When he was arrested in 1980, the maximum prison sentence was 22 years. He was released from prison early in 1994, due to him being a madman, but was released from a mental hospital in 1998. In 2002, he was connected to another murder, and to this day, no one knows where he is. Any medical serial killer, Michael Swango, Janine Jones, Charles Cullen, etc. Their patients trusted them, and this was what they did to them. Janine Jones, who was recently up for parole, killed pre- or nonverbal children, which made her story even more terrifying, and the one she went to prison for was in a doctor's office. The Toolbox Killers, the transcript from the audio recording of them torturing and killing a young girl. Words can't describe the level of disturbing. It's heartrending, wrapping her and shattering her bones with hammers while she can be heard crying and whimpering and praying. I don't know how the cops or jury could function in life after having to hear that. They did this with multiple young girls they picked up in their van, but only one was recorded. Those 2 motherfuckers can burn in hell. I'm personally against the death penalty, not because I don't believe some people should die, but I believe not dying sometimes is worse than death. Some people deserve more than just the death penalty. Edit, not implying torture. The loss of freedom for your entire remaining life is much worse than death. I'm in Michigan, which is a non-death penalty state. Dude who murdered my friend got a 200-year sentence. He's going to spend the rest of his miserable, useless life in prison. That's a lot more justice, than his death. You took her life. She has no idea anymore. But we do, and you do, live with the guilt, fucker. And then would, in later life, go on to blame violent media and pornography for his crimes. Sure, Jeffrey, you're one of the most unique, depraved serial killers in all of history, but it was the porn that made you do it. Sure, edit, user below reminded me that was Ted Bundy, not Jeffrey Dahmer. To his minor credit, the latter did take responsibility after the fact. Israel keys hands down what he did to his victims, plus the fact that he was so basic and normal, kept a job and long-term relationships while killing people for 12+ years. He used hair and clothes from his victims as disguises for future crimes. He almost partially thawed a frozen victim and posed her for a proof-of-life photo after she had been dead in his shed for 2 weeks while he was on a cruise with his family. Give me go with Mexican cartels. They've done everything any serial killer has done, probably 1,000x over. They got multiple killers, torturers, rapists. They chop you up, chop your kids up, they put you in a car of acid alive, bury you alive, shot up your whole house, car, burn you alive. And not only are they still doing it but under the protection of their country's gov. If you want just a one-person answer, then it's Albert Fish. Back then, forensics and technology weren't even around yet. This guy only went after children, as many as 100. Torture, raped and consumed children. I can understand being an adult and scared you're about to be raped, but think of being a 5-year-old little girl and you've just been kidnapped by this man and now you're in his house and all you want is your mom or dad ... but you're about to be beaten, raped, and mutilated. Remember, you're a child. Yeah, nobody tops this guy. Any who were never identified or caught, like Zodiac, Smiley Face Killer, or Jack the Stripper, they're probably 98 years old today, sitting in their old man chair, watching people go about their day while sipping some tea. Hell, you might have even walked by their neighborhood or house, reflecting their younger killer days and chuckling to themselves at being the infamous legends they are, and taking the secret to their graves, only not killing again due to being too old. We're alive and living at the same time as them right now if they are that old. But we didn't even exist when longer ago they racked up bodies and stayed cloaked in mystery, and we don't know who they are or where they are, and for all we know, we're living right by the very man who slaughtered those many people all those years ago. By pure size, Edmund Kemper should be up there. 6'9", and he'd often decapitate people and then have sex with their heads, his own mother included. After he was arrested, he was very open about everything he did and often did interviews with the FBI. He was the killer who practically spawned the Bra with John Douglas. You can listen to his interviews on the Sword and Scale episode 92. It's freaky. Came here for this one. Kemper is terrifying not just because of his size, but also because of his intelligence. Dude realized he had a major problem with his mother, killed a bunch of women as practice runs, killed his mom, then realized he'd solved his problem, called the cops, turned himself in, and has been considered the model prisoner ever since. That's terrifying. So true. He himself and the way he works is what got me into abnormal psychology as my major. It takes a genius like him to become what seemed like a near expert in psychology to basically create the framework for a psychopath. Help is on a way to catch them and recognize them, and assist in catching. All because he secretly read up on enough psychology books in juvie to fool his own psychologist into thinking he was reformed. He is a textbook definition of an evil genius, and frankly, I wholeheartedly believe that if he didn't turn himself in, he never would have been caught. I wholeheartedly believe that if he didn't turn himself in, he never wouldn't been caught. I'm tempted to agree, though with the caveat that after killing both his mom and her friend, then leaving a note at the scene and taking off across the country, everything literally pointed to him being the perpetrator at that point. It's terrifying that he had to call the police on himself twice to get them to take him seriously and go pick him up though. Psychotic enough to murder all those people, yet sane enough to realize not only what he'd done was wrong but also that he'd keep doing it unless the state kept him locked away from everybody else. Like ... You couldn't write this guy as a character in a novel and have anybody believe it, but there he is anyway. Christ. Toy Box Killer is number 1, but I think Jeffrey Dahmer is a close second. Let us not forget that he kidnapped a teenage boy, drilled a hole in his head, and then dumped acid directly into his brain in order to create a sex zombie. The boy actually somehow survived this and managed to escape, but when he was found by someone, Dahmer somehow convinced that person that everything was okay and the boy was someone he was related to and was allowed to take the boy back to his apartment, where he then dumped more acid into the boy's brain, which ended up killing him. He almost regularly ate his victims and stored their body parts in his fridge and freezer. Richard Trenton Chase, he asked Dressler to give him access to a radar gun, with which he could apprehend the Nazi UFOs, so that the Nazis could stand trial for the murders. He also handed Dressler a large amount of macaroni and cheese which he had been hoarding in his pants pockets, believing that the prison officials were in league with the Nazis and attempting to kill him with poison food. Dude wasn't just a sick bastard, he was completely out of it. Yes, I 100% agree with you here. I can't help feeling a deep pity for him though. He was clinically insane to the point where he was feared by the staff of the asylum and called Dracula. When he was released, his mother decided to take him off the meds he needed to be at all stable, 2, cast out of the family home and sent to live alone in an apartment still without the medication and supervision that he desperately needed. He believed his blood was turning to powder and that the bones of his skull were shifting around. I cannot imagine how terrifying that must be. He was found covered in blood out in the desert and released by the cops when they found out it was cow's blood. He made smoothies with Coca-Cola and whole rabbits. After he was caught, he was interviewed by a detective. During the interview, Chase pulled out a fistful of macaroni from his pocket and asked that it be tested. He is guilty as sin, but good lord, what kind of a life is that? So yes, guilty, but a whole host of others share some of that responsibility. I'm going to go against the grain here and say Harold Shipman. He may not have tortured his victims, or subjected them to an excruciating death, but he was scary for an entirely different reason, and that was the simple fact that he was in a position of trust. He was killing people for 20 years, and may have killed as many as 250 people. People just don't expect to be killed by their doctor, and it is very easy for a doctor to cover his tracks and pass off his patients' deaths as standard medical deaths. Another killer like him would be capable of doing untold damage without being noticed. For all we know, there could be another Harold Shipman anywhere in the world, killing without much difficulty, and we have no idea it's even happening. Keith Hunter Jesperson, not so much just him, but the idea that he was an over-the-road trucker. The FBI had a map diagram with over 500 locations of dead bodies that are believed to be from trucker serial killers. It's the perfect job for one. You pick up a girl at a truck stop, get her in the sleeper, do your thing, park somewhere in another state and dump the body. Jesperson actually tied a woman face down under his truck and drove a number of miles to erase her identity. The Candyman of the Houston mass murders. He hired 2 teens to go out into the community and lure other teens back to his apartment, get them drunk and/or high on weed, so he could rape, torture them to death. It was the most shocking account I'd ever read when I unfortunately found that Wikipedia page after trying to jog my memory about that Angelina Jolie movie Changeling. Woof. Don't read it if you ever want to feel safe sending your teenage son out into the world again. I had to give mine the lowdown and a big parenting talk after learning about this.